Hey, how's it going guys? It's Nate here. And as I've repeated, Skyrim is the host to hundreds, heck, maybe even thousands of different characters for the Dragonborn to meet, interact, and sometimes even contend with throughout your travels. Many of the souls you come across will be kind-hearted, benevolent folks, simply desiring to get by and make their own way in life. However, a number of Skyrim's inhabitants aren't quite so benevolent, and a good quality of men and mer living in this frozen province of Tamriel are harboring some deep secrets, or otherwise very dishonest indeed. And it's some of those not so integrity-heavy individuals that I wanted to, shall we say, expose today. So sit back and relax, as we take a look at my top 5 liars in The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Starting off, we have Captain Valmir. You can encounter this dishonest Altmer just outside of an ancient Nordic tomb in the Rift, known as Ferelhast. When you meet him, he'll be donning the armor of, well, whatever Civil War faction you've aligned yourself with, and will tell you that as an officer of, insert Civil War faction here, he requires your assistance to complete a mission he's been assigned. Considering I've already told you that the dude simply changes his affiliation between the Imperials and Stormcloaks depending on the players, you can probably tell there's something very shady going on here. Especially when you factor in that the dude's an Altmer, an elven race rarely seen in either army. But despite his inherent shadiness, if you choose to indulge Captain Valmir, he'll ask that you venture into the ruin and acquire the Mask of Degate, an ancient dragon priest. It's left unclear why he can't be bothered to go in himself, but this will begin the quest, Siege of the Dragon Cult. To make a long story short, you enter Ferelhast and fight your way through the surprisingly massive dungeon, while finding the corpses of previous unlucky adventurers Valmir likely enlisted along the way. Eventually, you confront Degate, defeat him, and capture his mask. But as you're leaving Ferelhast and make your way to report back to your self-proclaimed superior, you'll find Captain Valmir, now in opposite faction armor, talking to a soldier of the opposite Civil War faction, trying to convince them to go into the dungeon and do what you just did. So if you're an Imperial, when you leave you'll find Valmir now dressed as a Stormcloak, trying to convince a Stormcloak soldier he's their boss too. As soon as Valmir spots you though, he'll realize that the jig is up, and you're onto him, prompting the fake captain to turn hostile to both you and the unsuspecting soldier he was speaking with. You'll have to murder him to death in order to complete the quest. On Valmir's body will be a note, which reveals his true allegiances and intentions. You see, he's neither Stormcloak nor Imperial, but instead, an agent working for the Thalmor. They were the ones who ordered him to recover the Dragon Priest Mask of Degate, and suggested that to accomplish such a task, he pose as a high-ranking captain in one of the armies and enlist men to help him clear the dungeon. Alas, while his disguise may have proved successful, he fooled the wrong person. And now it's the Dragonborn, not the Dominion, that gets to keep the mask. Next on our list, Suborn is the owner and proprietor of the Honningbrew Meadery, one of Skyrim's 2 largest competing mead distributors, with the other being Blackbriar bottled mead. The rivalry between Honningbrew and Blackbriar is fierce. Suborn valiantly condemns his competitor, calling Blackbriar mead utter sludge, and asserts that his beverage is superior by any metric you choose. Whereas the Blackbriars, well, they try to have Suborn killed, but no matter, despite Suborn's passionate proclamations of Honningbrew mead's superiority to the other stuff, he may in fact secretly be lying, and actually prefer the Blackbriar's beverage to his own, though would never admit that. As underneath his bed, Suborn has a bottle of none other than Blackbriar mead stored away, implying that he at very least has a taste for the stuff, if not downright likes it more than his own. Now, as we've discussed before, the Blackbriars aren't entirely honest folks themselves, what with trying to assassinate people and everything. But it would seem that they have one very unlikely fan. For third spot, Degate is a Breton beggar living in Markarth. He spends his days begging passerbys for what coin he can, before spending it all at the Silverblood Inn, and then going to bed in the Warrens. Degate's particularly noteworthy, as unlike most beggars, he's incredibly rude to you, even if you choose to help him. Should you give him a coin, Degate will say, "Thanks, now get lost." Clearly this fellow isn't the most deserving of our sympathy, but he says otherwise. In conversations you can have with him, or over here, Degate will claim that he's been forced to beg, following a terrible accident he suffered as a miner at Sidna Mine. Sidna Mine, for those of you who don't know, is an especially brutal place many of Markarth's prisoners are sent, where they're forced to mine silver under terrible conditions. Degate's story goes that he was sent there for pickpocketing, which is already a pretty dishonest thing to do and raises some eyebrows, was, but eventually got hurt so bad by the time he was released he was incapable of working. Well, such a tragic tale indeed appears to have been entirely made up by our beggar friend, as in a conversation you can hear between himself and another Breton named Kosnak, he appears to admit that his story is just one of a few false ones he occasionally uses. Take a listen.
How did you manage to cripple yourself, Degate? Mining accident, back when I was in prison for being a pickpocket. You're lying. You're not quick enough to be a pickpocket. What's the real reason? Fell off the top of the cliff after a drunken party with the priestesses of Dibella. I don't buy that story either. Too bad. That one's my favorite.
So, what really left Degate crippled and broke? Well, we may never know. Maybe I should include this in my next mystery video. Coming in at number 4, Anice is an elderly, seemingly harmless old woman peacefully living alone in her small cabin in the woods southwest of Riften. Or, at least, that's what she wants you to believe. When spoken to, Anice will say adorable old people things like, "It's so nice to have a visitor," and "It's tough scraping by, but I make do." She spends her days sitting out on her chair in the sun and occasionally doing some cleaning and tending to her garden. Again, seems harmless and adorable, but this woman is indeed the personification of evil. You see, underneath some straw in her cabin, the player can find a strange locked cellar door. Open it, and you'll be transported into a basement that doesn't look very innocent. Inside the cellar are a plethora of poisons and potions, an alchemy table, human bones, and so much more. Anice definitely has a very spooky secret. On a shelf within the structure is a note written by her, addressed to a sister named Helgi that she's yet to send. In it, Anice begs Helgi to come live with her in the forest, promising a third, unnamed sister of theirs is eager to join them, and that together, the trio can form a coven, which literally means gathering of witches, and Helgi can begin her training. It's clear as her crystal soul gems, Anice is secretly a witch. When you emerge from the basement, however, she'll spot you and immediately turn hostile, saying, "Fool, no one can know my secret." You'll then be forced to put a final end to this feeble mage. But that's not where our investigation of this character ends, as some digging in the creation kit reveals that she's actually assigned as a sister to Moira. Moira, for those of you who don't know, is a hagraven the Dragonborn can meet, and apparently married, just before the quest, A Night to Remember. Moira is almost certainly that unnamed sister mentioned in the letter. In fact, if you kill Anice, it's possible you can have bandits sent after you by Moira herself. Now, Anice's other sister, Helgi, isn't referenced in the game's files, but she obviously has at least one sibling that's already indulged herself in the black arts. Regardless, it's up to you to rid Skyrim's forests of this witch, who is also technically your sister-in-law. Oh dear. And finally, last on our list, Anuriel is the Bosmer stewardess to Jarl of Riften, lately a lawgiver. At first glance, she seems like any other loyal servant of her hold's court, pledged to defend the interests of her Jarl and her city before all else. But a little bit of digging will indeed bring up the fact that this wood elf may have some very conflicting ulterior objectives. On a desk in her quarters, a note can be found from Maven Blackbriar, which is less of a note and more of a set of orders regarding how she wants Anuriel to handle the detainment of her son Sibi, and demands that he be treated, quote, "as I'd expect you treat any Blackbriar," but to not let him out until Maven gives the okay. This note alone is pretty corrupt of Anuriel to entertain. Furthermore, during the Civil War quest, Compelling Tribute, if you sided with the Imperials, you'll be sent to gather incriminating evidence against Anuriel, as she's the stewardess of a powerful Stormcloak-aligned hold, and could prove a useful asset if blackmailed successfully. This incriminating evidence comes in the form of another letter from Maven Blackbriar, apparently written shortly after Anuriel was given her stewardess position. In it, Maven congratulates Anu, but also reminds her of her obligations, stating that Maven expects the new stewardess to ensure Hunting Brew Mead, remember those guys, not be allowed within the city, and promises that so long as Anuriel serves her interests, Maven will serve Anuriel's too. Thus, Jarl Laelia Lawgiver's own stewardess seems just as corrupt as the very Thieves Guild she so adamantly fights against. And with that, we are going to wrap up. Top 5 liars in The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Now, this is not a complete compilation of every liar and dishonest character in the game. There are plenty of those, so leave a comment down below on your favorite that I've yet to cover. Maybe we'll do a part 2. Thanks for stopping by, everyone. As always, like ratings are very much appreciated. Again, thanks for watching, and I hope to catch you all in my next video. Peace out, everybody.